So since I was here last, talking about our acquisition of what was at the time one of the cheapest NSXs to change hands. Of course, after that video, everybody comes out of the woodwork with a cheaper one that they bought somewhere, found in a storage unit, got it out of a barn, so on and so forth. But having bought that car with 200,000 miles and now driven it our additional 118,000 miles, we did cross over the 300,000 mile threshold for our first generation NSX back in 2021. And one question we often get asked is that the highest mileage NSX in the world? The short answer to that is no, it's not. The first generation NSXs are very robust platforms. If you're looking at just using this as an example, if you're looking at buying a first generation NSX and you intend on driving it, it's definitely a maintenance over mileage proposition. You're looking for a car that's well documented and has had any of the few but common electrical foibles or some other, kind of reliability modifications done to it. You're looking for that kind of documentation, as well as the major service intervals being done regularly, the coolant hoses, timing belt, water pump, that stuff. But beyond that, I wouldn't be scared of a car with high miles. Our car at 318,000 miles now, the 300,000 mile club for the first generation NSX is not even that exclusive. Just crossed being about 30 years old for the earliest cars, ours included. And so if you put sort of nominal mileage on them per year, you would be in the 200,000 mile range using them kind of like not even daily commuting miles. So there are probably dozens of 200,000 mile NSXs out there. Not all of them are all over the internet. 300,000 mile cars, the club gets a little smaller, but again, it's not even that exclusive. Off the top of my head, I can think of probably an easy dozen, ourselves included, that are over 300,000 miles. There's ours, there's a gentleman that has a twin turbo car. That one had an asterisk for us now as well, because at 315,000 miles, we finally had an issue that necessitated a rebuild, which is a story for another day. There's a gentleman that has like a car that he drove to 330,000 miles and then turbocharged it. There are several that I've come across. I may or may not have a spreadsheet of this, that have come across either eBay or Facebook Marketplace or the NSX forums for sale that have come up. I think there was an older gentleman in Ohio that had just a little bit over 300,000 miles that had used it to commute between his house and his boat dock on a semi-daily basis that was 100 miles away. You just have that kind of usage because they'll do it. Really, really high miles. The engines in the first generation NSX, both of the engines that you got there. So the NA1, which is a C30A 3-liter engine, and then the later C32B 3.2-liter engine that they came in those cars. They're very over-engineered for the power they produced in stock form. This was sort of the last vestige of the so-called gentleman's agreement in Japan. So those early cars listed the ubiquitous 270 horsepower. They will make a lot more than that. They're actually fairly restricted. I think the common wisdom is you're about 400 wheel horsepower before you're getting into having to do a lot of work internally. And that mainly starts with the pistons. The famous titanium rods in these cars, they'll hold a lot more than that. They're so overbuilt that you can run a lot more power through them, or you can run the stock power through them essentially forever. When you start talking about the actual highest mileage NSXs, you're talking north of 400,000 miles at this point. We were actually at the NSX Club of America's annual NS Expo. We were out in Arizona in 2022. This year it was in Atlanta with Mr. Ed Bolian as the keynote speaker. What better Atlanta icon to talk at a car event? In Arizona, when we were out there were 2 cars in attendance that were over 400,000 miles. One of them, I think, it was sort of surfaced on some other internet car media outlets not too long after that event, so late 2022, early 2023. However, just crossing 400,000 miles, that gets you in the conversation, we'll say. There was actually a plaque that Honda handed out to an official plaque for the highest mileage NSX in the world was handed out several years ago to a gentleman that had 440,000 miles on his car. Incidentally, at 440,000 miles, that car had been supercharged for about 100,000 miles of that. Again, very robust, over-engineered motors. But I don't think any longer at the top of the pile here. There is I periodically get updates out of Europe about an anonymous Austrian. It's his daily commuter, kind of Autobahn commuter situation. The last time I saw an update come out of that was something around the realm of 700 and something thousand kilometers, which was around 470,000 miles on this car. So getting close to 500,000 mark. And that right now is the high water that I'm aware of. We have a contingent from the NSX Club of Japan. We also have members of NSX Club of Europe and Australia that come to NS Expo. And every year I'll kind of have a conversation here and there like, hey, like, have you guys found anybody else? Again, there's always the possibility out there that there's somebody that is just dailying one of these cars and has been the original owner and maybe has more than that. But as far as the information I could find through the internet and through word of mouth from any region of the world, the highest mile NSX is currently sitting roughly 470,000 miles and counting somewhere in the Austrian countryside. The information that I get from that, I'll keep things anonymous here in case they didn't want for this to be known, but there's a shop that services NSXs in the region who I talk to occasionally. I bought parts from him, and we started this kind of conversation, and then he sort of sends me an update periodically when this fella comes in for his, must be on his 4th or 5th timing belt, but as far as I know, it's still the full original powertrain. So not just reciprocating assembly, but the full original engine, transmission. I'm sure it's had other bits and bobs replaced, but the core of these cars they're pretty indestructible. This level of reliability does kind of lend itself to making the NSX a nearly ideal road trip car, and that's something that my wife and I very much enjoy, taking advantage of that aspect of its ownership. Mechanically, you really don't have to worry about much as long as you keep on top of maintenance and keep a couple of key spares with you that are kind of known to go bad. And it's Honda problems, like your fuel system relay has a tendency to pack up every 10 years or so. I was recently scared to death by that after having the engine rebuilt and getting it back home. I was out filming for my own YouTube channel a reveal video of, hey, the NSX is back, and it just cut out and stopped running. And I was like, went through, slowed down, did the mental checklist, and was like, hang on. It's probably the main relay. Went back home, already had the spare. Like, I think I had a spare in the glove box. I didn't have the ubiquitous 10mm wrench with me. So went back home, managed to get it started eventually, limped it back home, changed that out, all's well. Aside from little weird stuff like that, the utility of the car is really pretty impressive for what it is. This is a true mid-engined, I'm going to call it a supercar. People are going to debate me in the comments on that, but for its time it was. It is actually fairly good at swallowing an entertaining amount of accoutrement for your road trip. So my wife and I have taken, I think our record to date is an 8,200 mile trip that went from Tennessee to Oregon to Colorado to California and then back to Tennessee. I think we ended up being on the road for nearly 20 days on the road between doing events and the driving to get there and to and from. And we managed to pack the car. I think we did laundry once during the trip, but other than that, I think we were 16 days on the road before we needed to do laundry because of the unexpected second leg of that adventure. And so it's just kind of gotten down to an art form, really. We messed around with it the first time we started going to distant events. Usually it would be NS Expo, our annual NSX Club event that kind of moves around the country. And that's been anywhere from now 3 hours being the closest to 40 hours being the furthest away one direction. And so we've kind of gotten packing down to a little bit of a science. And if you get kind of creative, you can really be pretty efficient packing an NSX. Whereas in your typical Italian supercar, you may be able to get a weekend's worth of stuff in there. But this, you can get a couple of weeks of stuff in there if you do things correctly.
Between cannonballs and rallies and car treks, I've been on well over 100 road trips, but one of the things that I always see is that nobody else is terribly prepared. And this is not just a jab at Freddie, but generally people don't bring the tools, the supplies, and the things they need to make it all the way to the destination of their road trip. And so I decided, after building kind of the kit that I take between cars for the long drives I go in unreliable vehicles, as the ultimate road trip survival kit. And you'll find a link in the description below to an Amazon shopping cart of the things that I think you need in order to get there and get there without a tow bill attached to it. So check it out now, buy what you think you want, let me know in the comments what I left out, and we'll try to keep refining it so we can build the ultimate road trip survival box.